Jex Saarelaht and Shane O'Mara, welcome to Australian Musician.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
We're talking today because the album Chris Wilson Live at the Continental is being re-released on January 22nd for the first time on vinyl and also with some additional tracks. A lot of bands, or many bands, release live albums, but not all of them go on to be acclaimed. Why do you think that so few live albums work?
I don't know. I've never actually heard that. I think there's the live albums that I have been drawn to have been sort of quite incredible. I think one, to capture a band live is hard often, and I think that's why a lot of albums, they're ostensibly live, but it's not just one night. It's a collection of tunes of takes rather, or over a bunch of nights. But I think, if I think back to the first live record I ever bought would have been Johnny Winter and Live, which blew my mind because I was sort of, amazed that, being very young, that this guy could play like that. That's the first thing that comes to mind. But, sorry to state the obvious, Jex, but, Keith Jarrett, his series of live recordings are just legendary and extraordinary.
Wow.
But what's an example of a bad live record?
I probably didn't phrase that properly. I didn't mean that the majority of live albums are bad. It's just that not many of them go on to become legendary, I suppose, and influential.
Well, I think, if I can jump in, if we're just going to cut straight to the chase to Chris's album, our record, that was, some recordings, live recordings are just the band in full flight or whatever. But I think with Chris, with that recording, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jex, I've been saying that we didn't know it was being recorded.
Yeah,
maybe it was recorded. Yeah,
there was nothing set up front. I think we twigged when we arrived back at the gig after soundcheck and found the truck in the driveway. I think we had then we were asking what's with that, but we didn't.
Right. I can't remember those precise things, but what I've been saying, which might be a complete furphy, was that given that we kind of weren't that conscious of it being recorded, and why I think this album does resonate so much with so many people, is that it really, captured a moment where we hadn't rehearsed that much. It was pretty open, and it happened to be one of those nights, and it's incredibly fortunate and fortuitous that it was recorded, and it would turn out so well.
And the other thing I think that's really relevant here is that the venue, the Continental, really encouraged appreciation of music. It wasn't just a pub that stuck music on in the background so they could sell more beer. They looked after the punters, like you were fed and watered if you wanted it, but the focus was definitely at showtime on the music. And
absolutely,
so that created an atmosphere where the audience was receptive. They were sort of like waiting for something to be given to them, and that made the performers, feel wanted, I guess, and appreciated. So there was a really great vibe in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and this is another thing I've been saying, that, as I remember it, and what I truly love about certain tunes in that first, the original recording, songs like Him and The Changeling, You know, we were given license by Chris just to open up. It wasn't structured so much, and they were the sort of tunes which were sort of open for just improvisation, and Chris encouraged that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's, you know, again, it's very hard listening to your own recordings, but and I'm, you know, I just love those things, and I love just hearing that blend of instruments, the Hammond and guitar and Chris. Like, it's quite a unique trio setting.
Yeah, but the original release only had 9 tracks. The new one has 17. Do you know why the original only had 9?
Well, no, I think maybe the extra tracks are all mainly covers, aren't they? No,
I think they. Actually, there's a number of tracks that were on, I think, Landlocked.
Landlocked, yes, yeah.
There are a couple that were on Landlocked, I think, on the original release. I think it was just the original release was sold to us, to Shane and I at least, as an interim release, not really an album, was something that was said a number of times. It was just in between Chris's real albums. It was something to sort of, you know, just fill a gap before the next proper album.
Sounds like record company speak, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, but that's how I remember it being spoken to us, and so it wasn't. The idea wasn't to sort of like document performance so much as put out something to keep a bit of interest.
Yeah, and the irony is the reverse is true.
Mm.
It would seem to be, yeah.
I believe this was the first time you'd played together?
As that trio, that's my recollection, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty amazing that the album has gone on to become so acclaimed in Australian music folklore, and was the first time that you guys had played together.
Well,
I think we might have done one thing at Mietta's, perhaps.
As that trio? I don't think so.
Oh, no, not as a trio. It's just something. But yeah, no, it was definitely the first time that, yeah, we'd play. And how many rehearsals did we have, Jex?
From memory, 2.
Okay, yeah.
2 short rehearsals. And at those rehearsals, it was mainly about just sort of like knowing what the basis of the tune was.
Yeah, exactly.
But the idea always was, and this was Chris's, you know,
instigation, yeah.
His desire was to have the music open to whatever happens to some degree, you know, to encourage stretching out and improvising.
Yeah. I believe the Conti gig was the first gig that Chris had played after his mother had passed away. Were you conscious of that? Do you think that played on his performance?
I can't.
I'm conscious, but maybe Shane, maybe you know.
No, I wasn't. But the one thing Chris did was deliver all of the performance. And I have no doubt he was very close to his mum, and I have no doubt that he would have channeled that. And now that you mention that song Hymn starts off with, the first word is mother. So I've got no doubt that would have fueled Chris's night. Absolutely. Yeah. But that would, I mean, he's as vociferous as he was pretty private. So that was kept to himself.
Is there a track? Sorry, Jex.
I'm just going to say, I agree that no doubt it was channeled in some way, but I'd also say that Chris was pretty much 100%, 110% performer at just about every gig. I mean, unless he was sick or otherwise, you know, not on his top form, he was always really full on.
Yeah, and that's what he demanded from everyone who played with him. It was an embracing that, whatever be, 30 minutes, 2.5 hours, and, you know, giving it your all.
Yeah. Is there a track from the album that is closer to your heart than others?
Changeling, definitely for me. I think Changeling is an extraordinary tune, and particularly this reading of it. And, you know, I haven't talked about it a whole lot, but what I love about this recording, and what I can, as far as objectively listen to and be moved by, is just the sonics of it, and Jex's beautiful playing in a song like that just becomes this, you know, excuse the cliches, but, you know, it is just an extraordinary, deep, beautiful moment, open, and, you know, exactly what we're talking about, this Chris's invitation to stretch out. You know, intros where it was never, okay, after 16 bars you're coming in and then it's guitar solo. It's like, you know, Chris would just sort of look around and sort of point at you like, okay, start. You know, he was always into this, but just that sonic scape that happens in those two tunes particularly, I think is a truly beautiful thing.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I'd also say it's very fortuitous that Chris Thompson got such a great sound, because that's one of the pitfalls of live recording, is that the sound's not always balanced well, and or things drop out, or, you know, just all the things that can go wrong on a gig in terms of the sound. And he gets a great sound, and the blend. That's one of the things I love most about the recording.
Yeah.
Incredible blend. Sometimes you can't tell exactly what instrument's doing something. You think it's something, and then you think, oh, hang on, maybe that was that. You know, like it's because there's just a sort of a happy gathering.
I completely agree, and I think this speaks to what you were saying before, Jex. You know, as well as a capturing a night, you know, a good night, it's sort of honouring, is that the right word? You know, that was an extraordinary venue, as you were saying, and those people, the Marios, and all the staff, you know, you were, as soon as you walked up those stairs, you know, you were being, you know, you were readying yourself to the gig, and nothing that they did got in the way. You could have whatever you want. And, you know, it was an amazing PA. It was an extraordinary lighting rig. Everything, you know, the planets aligned that night.
Yeah, sure did.
Shane, do you remember what gear you used that night and why you chose it?
Yeah, I do. It's terrifying. I had one guitar. And that's it.
The good old days.
The good old days. You know, and I mean, I do love the sound and everything, but, you know, when I listen to the test pressing, I must say, you know, that DI guitar sound, it's like, ugh, good God. But yeah, it was just, that was the whole thing. Acoustic guitar, acoustic piano, Hammond, and the Chris's little tin flute.
Chris not only had a massive voice, but who's an incredible harp player as well, which sometimes gets overlooked. I guess being up there on stage, it sounded pretty big to you as well.
Absolutely. And that's another one of the areas that I love in him in particular. There's an openness about the way the music unfolds, and things tend to happen. To me, it sounds fairly organic. And one of my favorite moments is later on in the tune, after there's been a bit of a piano fantasia, and then the guitar comes back in, and then there's this sort of like little sort of, not a lull, but like a pause for a minute, and then this long note from the harmonica. Just this long note that sort of emerges out of the sound, and then off he goes. To me, it's really, it just representative of that night to me. It's sort of
amazing,
organic.
Chris was a great storyteller. Do either of you have a favourite Chris Wilson story?
You, Shane.
Okay, first thing that comes to mind is going interstate with Chris, just Chris and I. And yeah, I don't know why I think it's not even that funny, but early in the morning, like, and Chris was like, come on, you know, bit of a, didn't like to mess around. So he was up in the morning, we got in the car, and it was the first time when we got in, it had must have been one of the first sat nav things. So Chris is trying to use that. And, you know, I can't remember the voice, but it's going, you know, it was very early days, and they were fucking up all the time. It was those days where, you know, the sat nav, you know, if there was a creek, it didn't matter. You'd go, there was the road, it kept going. And just Chris eating breakfast, which was a giant pack of Colvan chips. Fucking listening to this thing. So turn left at George Street. Turn left at George Street. Bullshit. How does it know that? I don't know, Chris. Like, so he had this argument, starts fucking punching the thing. It was very, very funny. Chips going everywhere. But I could think of something. Do you have one, Jex? And I will think of.
Well, from the day of the Conti gig, I remember taking a break during the sound check, and we went down to Greville Records. And as we walked in, this voice, I am a cinematographer. And I just cracked up. And probably looked at Chris, and we just laughed. But I in particular, really laughed. It just, for some reason, struck me as absurd. And didn't think anything more of it at the time, and we had a look around the shop and did whatever we did. We went back to the gig later and finished the sound check, and then as I was leaving, Chris reached out and handed me a CD, and in the shop he'd gone and found out what that was, and it was Will Oldham, the Palace Brothers, and he bought it for me, which I thought was really sweet, but funny too.
Incredible. There's a testament to the man. That's another part about the Conti too, is Greville Records. That was sort of part of the almost a ceremonial aspect of playing there, is going up the sound check. You go down to Warwick at Greville and, you know, rifle through the stuff.
Yeah. So what do you think Chris Wilson's legacy is?
Well, you know, you mentioned Chris's harp playing, and I find it's interesting you said it's overlooked, because I've found that, you know, a lot of people and a lot of, you know, commentary and people who write after Chris's death, you know, has really focused on, you know, the gentleman of the blues thing. And I always had a bit of a problem with that tag, because he was much more than he was an extraordinary blues musician. And there's not many extraordinary blues musicians in Australia, pure blues musicians, of which he was one, and a virtuosic harp player. But, you know, his breadth of knowledge of music and his kind of writing, his writing was very broad. He was a very erudite man.
Absolutely.
And I think it's reflective in the tunes that I've mentioned, that, you know, this was not just a blues musician. This was a scholar of the blues who could play beautifully in that style, but his palette was much broader than that.
Yeah, and I think he actually, well, he did say to me a few times, I mean, he wasn't happy being put in that box of just being just the blues player. And so without putting that part of his music down in any way, and not at all, in fact, nevertheless, I think he bristled that the other things he did, you know, appeared not to be recognised because he was always being put in this blues man box. And while he certainly was a blues man, no doubt, when he chose to be, he also, as Shane says, he had a wide taste and skill in different songwriting areas, and he loved being a bit out there.
Yeah, you know, and the other aspect of his legacy was just his performance ethic. You know, as Jex said, you know, he gave it his all, and he reserved his energy for the show. You know, Chris would always just sit there, kind of Buddha-like, looking like a sort of a half hibernating bear, until it was showtime. There was one, I've just thought of a story of Chris. You know, he would never leave. Once he got to sound check, he would never leave the venue, except to go down and gravel. But so, well, I can't remember. It was with a band. It was probably some incarnation of Crown of Thorns with Peter Luscombe and Chris Rogers. And so at some venue, and I don't know who the support band was, but Chris was very accommodating before they played, and we were just sitting around while they were playing, and then they came into the band room, and Chris was saying, "What do you want? Would you like some? Take anything from the fridge," and that was really, really good, and blah blah blah. Thanks for playing. Blah blah blah. Sends out. So patting him on the back, shuts the door and turns around. He goes, "Okay, let's blow these cunts off the stage."
It's been an absolute thrill to talk about the album, and thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Good to see you, Jex.
And you, Shane.